Just wanted a sort of a clean technology, something not too far in the future, something very clean, but circular was always important because that's something I always felt was sort of important to the overall Planet of the Apes mythology. There's a sort of circular nature to the goes around, comes around type feeling just in the overall structure. So tried to keep that with the space stuff and keep it sort of clean and technological and that was all very important to sort of set against the brutal, ape world, and wanted to make that a real juxtaposition between the two. You can watch documentaries and look at things, but there's nothing like the weird vibe of being having a relationship with a real chimp. They're very I find them actually frightening. I put them up there with Santa Claus and circus clowns in terms of the fear factor, because they're sort of deemed as cute or looked upon as cute, and yet you're looking at them, there's a connection, but then they'll do something completely weird and psychotic and make you realize that there's a huge difference at the same time. There's so much you can do. But this sort of bubble-like effect kind of is something that, looked at a few different types of effects. But it just seemed like, I don't know, I like the term tsunami. Maybe it's just something that sounds, I don't know, I'm a big fan of Japanese design, and somehow it seems very Japanese, and therefore somehow I relate to it. Probably basically just on that level alone. And there was a thing in the script that said tsunami of light, so it just seemed very sort of operatic and musical somehow. Images for me are always very important. They tell me more than sometimes words, and that's why, again, we really stress the circular, almost like the egg-like quality of the ship, the pod, and kind of a birthing experience coming to the planet. All of that kind of was something that was visually important to me. I sort of was thinking of this first attack. I always remembered the flying monkeys in the original Wizard of Oz. There was a couple of shots where they're kind of coming down on them, and I remember that from when I was a child, being extremely terrified by that and wanting to try to get a little bit of that feeling into this stuff in this first attack. Seeing their sense of movement with this and seeing their sort of brutal kind of primal nature was something that felt was different from the first that way. We did use some lines from the original movie on occasion. We tried to put it in a different context. If it was said by a human, it's said by an ape, or, just again with that sort of juxtaposition of material. And also tried to put it in the context, if people didn't know what that original line was from the original movie, that it would still work just as a line in this movie. So tried to operate with those issues on two levels that way. Part of its original power to me is just seeing apes in a dominant role. I mean, I think that you see anything, it just makes you think about things in a weird level, and that's, I think, what I ultimately like about the material. It's just, you're looking at something that looks sort of normal but is flipped over, and you're not even quite sure what you're thinking, but it makes you think, and that's what I always felt. Something I appreciated in my life is it's what I appreciate about certain visual films. It's like you're not told everything. It makes you think about things, and I think that, to me, where it's left a bit more cryptic and you're kind of even questioning yourself what you're thinking about, is something I always appreciated. You're having to use both sides of your brain at the same time, which I find, again, interesting, conflicting, but the more people can do that, the more, I think, open you are to things, and that's what this material has in its nature. Just, again, any story you would do with it, it makes you see things from left field, from inverted, also kind of looking at it from a distance, seeing it from all sides at the same time. Paul Giamatti's great. I mean, he captured the perversion of orangutans. I mean, one of the things that was funny about the first movie to me is how, it sort of indicated that all chimps were good, which is completely wrong, and that orangutans are smart, and the gorillas were the bad, the warlike. And in fact, it's actually the opposite. It's like chimps are the scariest to me. the gorillas seem to be the most sort of powerful, but still somehow they don't scare me as much. And orangutans have always been like kind of perverted to me. I don't know if it's because of Vegas lounge acts or certain television shows, but you know, and I think Paul got that kind of weird, perverted quality that orangutans sometimes display. I grew up watching dubbed movies, and so I love people. You know, again, everybody's voice, like Michael Clark Duncan. I love people who sound like they've been dubbed, you know, and they're not. It's just coming out of them as people. It's something great about it. I love dubbed movies, and my favorite version of all of my films are dubbed.
They're not dumb.
The Dinner Party, I think I sort of based this on the painting of the dogs playing cards. I think was one of the inspirations for this. Because again, here we tried to show, you know, there's sort of in the way, like in the first movie where the apes are complete reversal and the humans are the opposite. Here we're in society in a sort of in a earlier part, or more fragmented, where again you've got some like the affluent apes that you'd see sort of in the future would move along to being more human-like, and then you've got the Thade character who's much more an ape purist and wanting to maintain that sort of ape-like qualities, and so you sort of see the sort of fragmentation of this society in this. I thought in the Dinner Party showed a, you know, interspecial marriage here. You could almost be in trouble on a lot of the aspects of the makeup in a certain way. I mean, one of the issues was like, okay, how much does it look like the person or not? You know, because you didn't want it to end up like the Wizard of Oz, because then it does become more like a caricature, you know? But at the same time, we wanted a little bit of a feeling and flavor of the people because, you know, because that's important too. So it was always this weird balance of finding what that was. Down with the costuming as well, you know? I mean, we tried certain things that looked... It all had to kind of come from the nucleus of the apes and what they were and how they moved and the kind of culture we were building around them and the kind of primal, how they might think and all of that. So yeah, that was the biggest challenge, was to find out when it was like going too far or not far enough. A lot of our ape movements, we sort of discovered and intertwined a lot of like samurai movements, because it seemed like, and even in the costumes there was a slight Japanese feel. We didn't completely go that way, but in studying ape movements, you know, because we thought like, well, you know, if an ape with a sword, they don't use it like, you know, they don't do overhand like we all do. They have a certain kind of rhythm and movement, which again, watching some samurai films was very much like that. The way, the kind of simple, strong, but then quick and sort of elegant, but strong, almost scary movements, you know, juxtapositioned with a slow, kind of still in the positions that they sit in and the way they move. And so that did work itself into some of the sets, some of the movements, and some of the costumes as well. I prefer to look at movies more like they are what they are. You know, the idea of going back to like King Kong, it's because you could do the effects better, making them better. That's something that, you know, I think movies need to, they are what they are. That's why I like the time frame of it. I like the limits of it, because it's like a time, you know, it's all the energies of that time and of that moment put into one thing. And so I try not to think too much about doing something differently, because I'd go insane. There were things like, if I had more time, like, you know, like when I listened to the album, like there were some cuts of Danny's music that I think, you know, because we had to cut certain things down here or there, that I would have liked to rework some music maybe, because I thought he did an amazing score. It's one of my favorites of his lately, I think, and you know, I would have liked to had a little bit more time to kind of fool around with some things like that, and you know, other issues, but I don't dwell too much on it, because like I said, it would drive me insane. When I remember when they did that with Star Wars, I thought, well, you know, I was kind of against that, because it's like, you know, that movie was such a milestone. It's like don't you want to see it as it was? I mean, I do. I don't want to see them keep adding things to it, no matter what it was really intended. I mean, we all intend movies to be more than they actually turn out to be. I mean, I think. So, as long as it's still got some feeling of something in there that you wanted to do, I think that's the main thing. Fixing things doesn't necessarily mean you're actually fixing it somehow. I don't think. Especially movies that are really good and work very well and that people really, really like. I mean, what's the, if you make something that's really bad and you want to fix it, maybe that's another issue. But to make something that's deemed, that's actually takes, things to another level, I think is important to the history of film.
Oh, my retro burners.
They look like an aging boy band, the crew. I don't know, maybe it's their outfits or whatever, or just the way they're all standing there together. In sync 20 years later.